Namaskaram. So let's discuss about a very important chapter from the book Hidden Mysteries written by Osho. So the name of the chapter is The Occult Science of the Third Eye. So let's talk about it. Before I talk to you about the wearing of the vermilion or sandal paste mark on the forehead, I would like to tell you about two events. It will make things easier for you to understand. Both of them are historical facts. In 1888, a person named Ramanuja was born into a poor Brahmin family in South India. He became a very famous mathematician. He could not study much, but still his genius in mathematics was unique. Many well educated mathematicians had earned a name as a result of being trained and guided by the others for years. But Ramanuja was not even a matriculate and had no training or guidance from anyone. Hence, those who know mathematics say there has never been a greater mathematical genius than Ramanuja. With great difficulty, he got a clerical job, but soon the news spread that he had an amazing talent for mathematics. Someone suggested he write a letter to the famous mathematician Professor Hardy of Cambridge University, who was the most eminent mathematicians of those days. Ramanuja did not write a letter, but rather solved two theorems of geometry and sent them to Hardy. Hardy was astonished to receive them and could not believe someone so young could solve such theorems. He immediately wrote back to Ramanuja and invited him to England. When Hardy met him for the first time, he felt himself like a child before Ramanuja in the field of mathematics. The genius and capabilities of Ramanuja were such they could not have been due to mental powers. The intellect moves very slowly. Thinking takes time, but Ramanuja did not take any time in responding to Hardy's questions. No sooner was the problem written down on the blackboard or put to him verbally than Ramanuja began to reply without any gap for thinking. It was very difficult for the great mathematician of the time to understand how it was happening. A problem which would take an eminent mathematician about 6 hours to solve, and then too he was not sure about his accuracy, Ramanuja would solve instantaneously and unerringly. It proved that Ramanuja was not replying through the medium of the mind. He was not very learned. He had actually failed in matriculation, and there were no other indications of intellectual ability. But in mathematics, he was superhuman. Something was happening that was beyond the human mind. Ramanuja died of tuberculosis when he was 36. When he was in hospital, Hardy, along with two or three other mathematicians' friends, went to see him. As it happened, he parked his car in a place where Ramanuja could see its number plate. When Hardy entered Ramanuja's room, he told Hardy his number plate was unique. It had four special aspects to it. After that, Ramanuja died. It took Hardy 6 months to understand that what Ramanuja meant, but he could only discover three of the four aspects. On his death, he left a will that the research work on this number should continue. In order to discover the fourth aspect, Ramanuja had said there was a fourth, so there had to be. 22 years after Hardy's death, the fourth aspect was discovered. Ramanuja had been right. Whenever he began to look into a mathematical problem, something would happen in the space between his eyebrows. His eyeballs would turn upward, centering on that spot. In yoga, that space is described as the third eye point. It is called the third eye because if this eye becomes activated, it is possible to see events and scenes from different realms in their entirety. It is like looking out of your house through a small hole in the door, and suddenly, when the door opens, you see the whole sky. There is a space between the eyebrow where there is a small aperture which sometimes opens, as in the case of Ramanuja. His eyes rose to his third eye while solving a problem. Neither Hardy could understand this phenomena, nor would other Western mathematicians understand it in the near future. I will tell you about another event in connection with the wearing of the vermilion mark, so you will be able to understand its relationship to the third eye. Edgar Cayce died in 1945. 40 years before that, he fell sick, became unconscious, and remained in a coma for 3 days. The doctors had lost all hope and said they could not find any way to bring him back to consciousness. They thought his unconsciousness had become so deep that perhaps he would never come out of it. Every kind of medicine was tried, but there were no signs of his regaining consciousness. On the evening of the third day, the doctors announced they could do nothing more and that he would die within 4 to 6 hours. Or if he lived, he would have brain damage, which would be worse than death. Because as time passed, the delicate veins and cells of his brain were disintegrating. But suddenly, Kaise started to speak, even though he was in a coma. The doctors could not believe it. Kaise's body was unconscious, but he was speaking. He said he had fallen from a tree, his backbone was injured, and that was why he was unconscious. He also said that if he was not treated within 6 hours, his brain would be affected and he would die. He suggested some herbal medicine which he should be given to drink and said he should then recover within 12 hours. The names of the herbs which he requested were not likely to have been known to Edgar Cayce, and at first the doctors thought what he was saying was just part of his brain damage, because the substances he had suggested were not known to cure a condition such as his. But because Cayce had specifically mentioned them, they thought they should try them. These substances were acquired and given to Cayce. He fully recovered within 12 hours. When later the incident was related to him, Cayce could not remember suggesting any such medication. He neither knew the names of the medication nor recognized them. But this event in Edgar Cayce's life was the beginning of a rare happening. He became an expert in suggesting medications for incurable diseases. During his life, he cured some 30,000 people. Whatever prescription he gave was always right, without exception. Every patient who tried his medication was cured, but Cayce himself was not able to explain it. He could only say that whenever he closed his eyes to look for some treatment, his eyes would turn upward as if pulled towards the middle of his eyebrows. His eyes become fixed there and he forgot everything. He only remembered that after a certain point he became oblivious to his surroundings. And until he arrived at that point, the treatment would not come to him. He suggested some wonderful remedies, two of which are worth understanding. The, the Rothschilds were a very rich family in America. A woman from that family had been sick for a long time and no treatment had helped. Then she was brought to Edgar Cayce, and in his unconscious state, he suggested a certain medication. We have to call his state unconscious, but those who know about this mysterious happening would say he was fully conscious at that time. In fact, unconsciousness continues until our knowing reaches to the level of the third eye. Rothschild was a millionaire, so he could afford to search the whole of America for this medication, but he could not find it. No one could even say whether this medication actually existed. Advertisements were placed in international newspapers requesting information about it. After almost 3 weeks, a man from Sweden wrote saying there was no medication of that name in existence, although 20 years earlier his father had patented a medication under that name but never had it manufactured. He wrote that his father had died but he could send the formula. The medication was then made up and given to the woman, who recovered. How could Kaise have known of a drug that had not even been available on the market? In another incident, he again suggested a particular medicine to someone. A search was made for it, but it could not be found. A year later, an advertisement appeared in a newspaper announcing the availability of this medicine. During the previous year, it had been in the process of being tested in the laboratories. It had not even been given a name, but Kaise had known of it. The medicine was then given to the patient who soon recovered. Kaise had also suggested medicines which could not be found, and these patients died. When he was asked about this, he said he was helpless, but there was nothing he could do. He said, I do not know who is seeing these things and who is speaking when I am unconscious. I have no relationship to the person, but one thing was certain. Whenever he was speaking in this state, his eyes were drawn upward. When we are in deep sleep, our eyes are drawn upward relative to the depth of our sleep. Now, psychologists are experimenting a great deal on sleep. The deeper you are in sleep, the higher your eyes are. The lower the eyes, the greater in their movement. If your eyes are moving very rapidly under their eyelids, you are having a very eventful dream. Now it has been scientifically proven by through experiments that rapid eye movement REM indicates a fast moving dream. The lower the eyes, the greater the REM. As the eyes go higher, the REM is reduced. When the REM is zero, sleep is at its deepest. At that point, the eyes remain steadily fixed between the two eyebrows. Yoga says that in deep sleep, we reach the same state that we reach in deep meditation. The place where the eyes become fixed is the same in deep sleep as in deep meditation. I have told you about these two historical events only to indicate there is a point between your two eyebrows where this worldly life ceases and the life of the other world begins. That point is a door. On this side of the door, this world flourishes, and on the other side, there is an unknown supernatural world. The tilak, the vermilion mark on the forehead, was first devised as an indication and symbol of that unknown world. It cannot be applied just anywhere, and only one who can place his hand on the forehead and find the point can tell you where to apply the tilak. There is no use in putting the tilak just anywhere because the point is not in exactly the same place on everyone. The third eye is not found in the same place on everyone. It is somewhere above the middle of the two eyebrows on most people. If someone has meditated for a long time in his past lives and has had a small experience of samadhi, his third eye will be lower down. If no meditation has been done, the place on the forehead is higher up. It can be determined by the position of this point what the state of your meditation was in your past life. It will indicate whether the state of samadhi ever happened to you in your past life. If it happened often, this point would have come down lower. It will be at the same level as your eyes. It cannot go lower than that. If this point has come in line with your eyes, then with just the smallest happening, one can enter samadhi. In fact, the happening can be so small it can appear to be insignificant. And so often we are surprised when someone appears to slip into samadhi without an apparent cause. There is a story about a Jain nun. She was returning with a pot of water on her head after fetching water from a well. The pot somehow fell, and in that falling, the woman achieved become enlightened. enlightened. The incident seems so insignificant. The pot falls and breaks, and enlightenment happens. There seems to be no logical connection. There is another such event, this one in the life of Lao Tzu. He was sitting under a tree during autumn, and the dry leaves of the tree were falling. Watching them, Lao Tzu becomes enlightened. There is no relationship between enlightenment and leaves falling, but such things happen when, because of work done in past lives. Your spiritual journey is almost completed, and the third eye point has moved down, so it is between your two eyes. Then any small happening will tip the scales, and that final small happening can be anything. If the vermilion or sandal paste mark is put just at the right spot, it indicates several things. Firstly, if your master has told you to wear a tilak on a particular spot, you will begin to experience something there. You may not have thought about this, but if you sit with closed eyes and someone closely points his finger at the spot between your two eyes, you will have the feeling someone is pointing his fingers at you. This is the perception of the third eye. If the tilak is the same size as your third eye and it is put at just the right place, you will remember the place for 24 hours and forget the rest of the body. This remembering will make you more aware of the tilak and less of your body. Then a moment comes when nothing else is remembered about the body except the tilak. When that happens, you will be able to open your third eye. In this practice, as you forget the body and just remember the tilak, your whole consciousness crystallizes and becomes focused on the third eye. The key that opens the third eye is focused consciousness. It is just like focusing the rays of the sun on a piece of paper with the help of a lens. You create enough heat to burn the paper. When those sun rays are concentrated, fire is produced. When consciousness remains spread all over the whole body, it is just doing the work of carrying on your life. But when it becomes totally focused on the third eye, the barrier to seeing with the third eye is burnt, and the door which allows you to see the inner sky is opened. So the first use of the tilak is to show you the right place on the body so you remember it 24 hours a day. Another use of tilak is to make it easier for the master to see the place without having to put his hand on your forehead to see your progress. Because as the place moves downward, you will put the tilak a little lower. Each day you have to feel the place and move the tilak to it, to where you feel the presence of the third eye. The master may have thousands of disciples. While the disciple bows down to him, the master observes where his tilak is and does not need to ask anything about his progress. The tilak indicates whether the disciple is making progress or whether he is obstructed by something and has become stuck. If the disciple cannot feel the downward movement of the spot, it means he is not totally focusing on his consciousness. And if he has put the tilak on the wrong place, it means he is not conscious of the exact point. As the point goes on moving downward, the methods of meditation will have to be changed. The tilak is to the master what a patient's progress chart is to the doctor in a hospital. The nurse goes on recording the temperature, blood pressure, pulse, and so on. The doctor just has to see the chart to know the patient's condition. Similarly, the tilak was a great experiment to indicate the condition of the disciple. The master had no need to ask anything. He knew what help was needed or what needed to be changed. This was the value of the tilak, assessing the changes needed in meditation. Another aspect of the third eye is that it is the center of willpower. In yoga, it is called the Agya Chakra. We call it that because whatever discipline we have in our life is governed by it. Whatever order and harmony there is in our life arises from this point. Let us understand it this way. All of us have a sex center, and it is easier to understand through the sex center because we are all aware of it. We are not very aware of third eye chakra. All our desires in life are born at the sex center. As long as the sex center is not activated, there is no sexual desire. However, every child is born with the capacity for sex and the entire mechanism for fulfilling sexual desire. It is a strange fact that women are born with all the egg cells they could need for the entire length of their reproductive life. Not a single new egg cell can be produced later. From the first day of her life, the number of eggs a woman has indicated the potential number of children she can give birth to. After she reaches puberty, every month one egg cell will be released from her ovaries. If it meets and unites with a sperm from a man's semen, a child is conceived. Then no more eggs are released as long as that embryo is developing and until after the newborn child is a few months old. The desire for sex, however, does not arise until the sex center becomes active. As long as this center is inactive, even though the necessary equipment for sex is complete in the body, sexual desire is not aroused. When one reaches the age of 13 or 14, this center becomes active. We know this center because although we are not activating it, it becomes activated by nature. If the situation were otherwise, very few people would become aware of it. Have you ever wondered why, if just a thought of sex passes through your mind, the whole reproductive system becomes active? The thought arises in mind far away from the sex center, but the thought immediately activates the sex center. Every idea or thought about sex draws the sex center towards itself. Every thought is attracted towards its relative center, just as water flows to the lowest level. The third eye center is the center of willpower. Let us understand what its function is. People whose third eye chakra is not activated in this life will remain slaves in thousands of ways. Without this center, there is no freedom. We know about political and economic freedom, but these freedoms are not real. A person who has no willpower, whose third eye chakra is not activated, will always remain a slave in one way or another. He may become free from one kind of slavery, but he will become a slave to something else. He does not have a center of will to make him the master of himself. He has no willpower. He does not have the power to command himself. His body and senses command him. If his stomach says it is hungry, he is hungry. If his body says it is sick, he becomes sick. If his sex center says he needs sex, the sexual desire arises. If his body says it has become old, he becomes old. The body commands and he obeys. But as soon as the center of willpower becomes activated, the body stops giving orders and instead it starts to obey. The whole arrangement is reversed. If such a person asks his blood to stop flowing, it will. If he asks his heart to stop beating, it will. He can ask his pulses to stop throbbing and it will. Such a person becomes the master of his body, mind, and senses. But without the activation of the third eye chakra, this cannot be. The more you bring awareness to this center, the more you become the master of yourself. Many experiments have been done in yoga to awaken this center. Wearing a tilak on the forehead is one of them. If somebody bring this awareness to this center every now and then, there will be great results. If a tilak is put there, your attention is repeatedly drawn there. As soon as the tilak is put on, the spot becomes set apart from the rest of your body. This spot is very sensitive, and if the tilak is on the right spot, you will have to remember it. It is possibly the most sensitive spot in the body. It was an attempt to touch this sensitivity. There are methods for marking this sensitive spot. After hundreds of experiments, sandalwood paste was chosen. There is a sort of resonance between sandalwood paste and the sensitivity of the third eye chakra, and if we applied on that spot, the paste deepens its sensitivity. Not just any substance can be used. Some other substances, in fact, can badly damage the sensitivity of that spot. For example, women stick a colored plastic dot on their foreheads, but these tilaks from the marketplace do not have any scientific basis. They have nothing to do with yoga, and they cause harm to the sensitivity of the third eye. The question is whether a substance increases the sensitivity of the spot or decreases it. If it increases the sensitivity, it is good, otherwise, it is harmful. In this world, even a small thing can make a whole lot of difference. Everything has its own separate effect. Keeping this in mind, some special things were found to be useful. If the third eye chakra can become sensitive and be activated, it will bring about an increased integrity and dignity in you. You will begin to be more integrated, whole. Everything inside you ceases to be separate and divided, and you become whole. There is a small difference between the use of the tika, the small round mark, and the tilak, a longer mark. The tika was meant particularly for women. In women, a third eye chakra is very weak. It has to be because the woman's entire personality is created for surrender. Her beauty is in surrender. If her third eye chakra becomes powerful, then surrendering will be difficult. Her third eye chakra is weak, very weak compared to the man's. That is why a woman always needs someone's help in one form or another. She does not ordinarily venture to stand on her own, but looks to a helping hand, someone's shoulder to lean on, someone's to lead her. She likes someone to tell her to do something, and her willingness to follow makes her happy. India is the only country in which an attempt has been made to activate the woman's third eye chakra. This is only because it was felt that unless the third eye chakra is activated, the woman will not be able to make any progress in spiritual life. Without willpower, she cannot make any progress in meditative practices. It has to be made sound and strong, but it is necessary to make her third eye chakra strong in a different way. Because if it is done in the usual way, the same way as for a man, it will reduce her femininity and she will begin to develop the qualities of a man. So the tika was invariably and firmly associated with a woman's husband. This association was needed because if it was just applied independently, it would increase a woman's independence and make her self sufficient. And the more independent she became, the more her deli- delicateness, her beauty, and flexibility would be destroyed. There is a tenderness and softness in her seeking help from others. But if she became independent, she would not be able to avoid becoming hard and rigid. So it was thought that to make her strong directly would damage her femininity. It would create problems for her being a mother. It would make it difficult for her to surrender. Hence, an effort was made to associate her with center with her husband. This was powerful, helpful. Her femininity would not be affected, but her will center would still become activated. Let us understand it this way. The third eye chakra cannot go against the person who it is associated with. If it is associated with the religious master, it cannot go against him. If it is associated with a woman's husband, she can never go against him either. If a tika is put on the right spot on a woman's forehead with its deep association with her husband, she will follow him. But at the same time, she will be powerful in relating with the rest of the world. If you understand what hypnotism is, you will be able to understand this associative phenomena. If a hypnotist hypnotizes someone, then the hypnotized person will be able to hear only the voice of the hypnotist. He will hear the quiet command of the hypnotist, but he will not hear any loud noises that may be created by the spectators. This is similar to what happens when an Indian woman wears a tika. It makes her deeply suggestible. The hypnotized person remains open only to the hypnotist and closed to everyone else. If the hypnotist even whispers for the person to stand up, the person will do it, but he will not hear anyone else's loud command. This person's consciousness has now only one opening toward the hypnotist. His third eye chakra has become tied up only with the hypnotist. This mantra is used in connection with the woman's tika. She will follow only her husband and surrender herself only to him. She maintains her freedom and independence towards the rest of the world. But now there will be no problem with her femininity. Her womanhood can be preserved. Her feminine qualities are left undisturbed. When the husband dies, the tika has to be removed because now she is not to follow anybody. People have no idea about the scientific approach regarding the tika. They think that the tika is removed because a woman has becomes a widow, but there is a reason for removing it. Now she will have to live like any man for the rest of her life, and the more independent she becomes, the better it will be. Even the slightest area of vulnerability which might cause her to follow someone has to be closed. This tika experiment was very deep, but it has to be on the right spot and of the right material and put on correctly. Otherwise, it is meaningless. If the tika is only decorative, it has no value. Then it is only a formality. So, when the tika is applied to a woman for the first time, it is done with ceremony and with a formal ritual in the same way that a master puts a tilak on the disciple's forehead for the first time. Only if it is done that way will be effective and not otherwise. Now, all these things have become meaningless because the entire chain of scientific thinking behind them has been lost. It has become just an empty ritual, a hollow outer shell that is somehow still being carried without any purpose, without any love. I will tell you a few more things about the third eye chakra which will be useful. The line drawn upward from the Agya chakra divides the brain in two, right and left. The brain begins at that line. It has been observed that half our brain is not utilized. The most intelligent people among us, our geniuses, also use barely half of the brain, and the remaining half is unused and undeveloped. Scientists and psychologists are puzzled as to why this is so. Even if that half of the brain were to be surgically removed, everything would continue to function normally. The person would not even know that half of his brain has been removed. Scientists know that nature does not create anything unnecessarily. There could be a mistake with one person's brain, but not with the brains of the whole of humanity. But in all humans, half of the brain is unused, inactive without any movement whatsoever. Yoga maintains that this half of the brain becomes active only after the third eye chakra is activated. Half of the brain is connected with the centers below the third eye chakra, and the other half is connected with the centers above the third eye chakra. When the centers below the third eye chakra are working, the left side of the brain is utilized. When the centers above it begins to work, the right side of the brain is activated. As long as there is no experience of the activities of the other half, there can be no conception of it. In Sweden, a man fell from a train. When he saw when he was taken to the hospital, he began hearing the programs which were being broadcast on radio stations within a 10-mile radius around him. At first, it was thought there was some damage to his brain because he was describing the sound as just a humming in his ears. But after 2 weeks, he began to hear the radio programs clearly, and he became very frightened and asked the doctors what was wrong. He told the doctor he could hear the radio programs as clearly as if he had a radio near his ears. The doctor asked him what he was hearing, and he repeated the line of a song. The doctor had just heard that particular song on the radio at his home from where he had just come. After that song, the radio transmission for that season had stopped and the doctor had left for the hospital. When the transmission began again, a radio was brought into the hospital to compare what the patient heard with what was being transmitted. It was found that this man's were functioning like a radio receiver. Eventually, he had to be operated on, otherwise, he would have gone mad because there was no way to switch off the programs. He could hear the broadcasts all the time, whether he wanted to or not. This incident made one thing clear, that the ear has a great potential. By the turn of this century, it may be possible to use our ears to listen the broadcasts directly. The ear could work like a radio receiver simply by attaching an on off switch near the ear. The idea only came because this man had a train accident. Many new inventions have been made and new ideas and perspectives have been arisen accidentally in this world. On the basis of our past knowledge, we could never have thought that someday our ears might act as a radio receivers. Both the ear and the radio receivers do the work of hearing, both the receptive. But the radio was made after the ear. The ear served as a model. The radio is meaningful only because of our ears. The other potentialities of the ears will not be known unless we happen to accidentally stumble on them. A similar incident happened during the Second World War. A man was wounded and became unconscious. When he regained consciousness, he began to see stars in the sky in the daytime. Stars are always there, but because of the radiance of the sun, we are not be able to see them during the day. They are very far away and the sunlight intervenes. There are stars which are hundreds and thousands of times bigger and brighter than the sun, but they are farther away from the earth than the sun. Sun rays take about 9 minutes to reach the earth, whereas the light from the nearest star takes 4 years to reach the earth. The light from the sun travels at a speed of 186,000 miles per second. Even at this speed, sunlight takes about 9 minutes to reach the earth, and light from the nearest star takes 4 years. There are stars so far away that their light might take 4,000 years, 400,000 years, 40 miles years, or 40 trillion years to reach the earth. Some scientists say there are stars whose light rays began traveling towards the earth before it was born and may only reach here by the time the earth has disappeared. Those light rays may never know there was a phenomena called earth that existed during their journey. The stars that this wounded man saw do exist during the day. They just cannot be seen, but he saw them. What happened to his eyes? They had developed an extraordinarily capacity. This incident revealed the potential of the eyes. It indicated there is dormant potential in our eyes, of which we are unaware. All our senses have great dormant potential. Whatever seems like a miracle to us is only because of the sudden revelation of some of our ordinarily dormant potential. It is not a miracle. There are many miracles within us that are not manifest. They are hidden behind locked doors. Just a few minutes ago, I was telling you that half of the brain usually remains unused and only becomes active when the third eye chakra becomes activated. That is the insight of yoga. Such insights have not just come to light from recent experience but have been known for at least 20,000 years. You cannot rely on any conclusion reached by science because what science believes to be true today may be proved wrong within 6 months. But these insights of yoga are confirmed by the experience of at least 20,000 years. We have the illusion that ours is the first civilization, but many human civilization has happened before and have vanished. Many times before us, man reached the same or higher heights of scientific progress, but those civilizations were destroyed. In 1924, a Center for Research in Atomic Science was established in Germany. Suddenly, one morning, someone giving his name as Falknelli went to the institute and handed in a written message to the center's authorities. In the letter, he had written, I and a few others know certain facts about atomic science, and on the basis of that knowledge, I warn you not to go ahead with your atomic research because before our civilization, many other destroyed themselves through explosive atomic energy. It is better to stop any further research. Afterward, efforts were made to find the writer but without success. In 1940, Heisenberg, a very great scientist in Germany, had been working to develop atomic energy. Again, the same person, Falknelli, came to his house, handed a note to his servant, and then went away. The note contained the same message, and again the author could not be traced. In 1945, when the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, all 12 scientists who had helped to make the atomic bomb were sent a similar letter by Falknelli, telling them that even now it was not too late to stop further development of their work. Otherwise, since the first step toward destruction had been taken, the last step was not far off. Oppenheimer, who was the greatest American nuclear scientist and who had also contributed a great deal toward the making of the atomic bomb, immediately resigned from the nuclear board after receiving this letter and issued a statement saying, We have sinned. But once more, this Falknelli could not be traced. What Falknelli was saying is very possible. Earlier civilization did play with atomic power and did destroy themselves. In India, at the time of the Mahabharata war, we also played with atomic energy and destroyed ourselves. This is the situation. A child becomes a young man and commits the same mistake which his father committed. The father, who is now old, warns him not to. In his own time, his father had also warned him. But in youth, such mistakes are committed. Although the younger generations are warned by those who meanwhile have become old. Civilizations are also destroyed by taking the same step and making mistakes similar to those of past civilizations. Civilizations too pass through childhood and youth and then become old and die. The insights of yoga have been gained over a period of 20,000 years. Historically, the calculations for a period of 20,000 years are fairly clear. If you want to study the youth of one man, you need to study that of 10 Because what is true for one man may not be true for all men. The study of a single person and a single event are not conclusive enough by themselves. So that is why I said the picture of the past 20,000 years is fairly clear. For 20,000 years, yoga has maintained that if you want to know what there is beyond this worldly life, you have to activate the other half of the brain connected to the dormant and inactive third eye. If you want to know anything about the absolute, that which is beyond matter, this other half is of the brain will have to be activated. And the door to this half of the brain, the place of the third eye chakra, is where we apply the tilak. The spot is the outward location and it corresponds to the inner center, which is about 1.5 inches inside the forehead. That deep point, that center, functions as a door to the transcendental world beyond matter. Just as in India, the tilak was devised, in Tibet methods were devised of actually surgically operating on this spot in order to reach the third eye chakra. Tibetans have made a lot of effort to find the third eye more than any other civilization. In fact, all of Tibet's sciences and understanding about life in its various aspects are based on the understanding of the third eye. I told you earlier about Edgar Cayce giving prescription while in a trance. He was the only such case in America. But in Tibet, people would ask for medical advice only from those who were able to go into trance, into samadhi. Tibetans tried to reach the third eye chakra surgically by breaking it open from the outside. But reaching this place surgically is quite different from reaching it internally through yoga practices, as has been done in India. When the dormant half of the brain becomes activated internally through yoga practices, it becomes activated because of the development of consciousness. Opening this center from the outside without any refining or purifying of consciousness creates the danger that achievements of that half of the brain may be misused after it has been activated. Because the man remains the same, his consciousness has not been transformed from within through meditation. What is needed is a change in consciousness through meditation. If this half of the brain becomes activated without an inner transformation, then, for example, the person who becomes capable of seeing through walls and beyond material obstructions may not try to save someone whom he sees has fallen into a well, but he may prefer to dig out treasures which he can see lying hidden under the ground. If such a person realizes that he can make people obey him, he might order you to do things to benefit himself. External operations could have been done in India also, but Indians never attempted to do them because practitioners of yoga know that if consciousness is not transformed from within, it is dangerous to activate such powers and put them in the hands of people who might misuse them. It is like giving a sword to a child. He may not only kill other people, he might also kill himself. So, a transformation of consciousness is necessary before new powers are activated. In Tibet, they tried to make a hole with physical instruments on the spot where we apply the tilak. So Tibetans came to know and experience many of the powers of the dormant brain, but as far as spiritual discipline is concerned, Tibet could not become a great country. It is surprising that even though Tibet did a great deal, it could not give birth to a Buddha. It developed many powers. It came to know many unique things, but it used them for trivial matters. India did not try to experiment with physical instruments, but tried to concentrate and focus the total energy on the third eye chakra from within. So the third eye would opened by the very force of that surging energy. It is a great discipline to bring the flow of consciousness up to the third eye. The mind has to be elevated to high levels of discipline. Normally, the mind gravitates downward. In fact, our mind normally flows towards the sex center. Whatever we may be doing, earning money, increasing our status, anything, in a subtle way, it is our desire for sex that is the motivating force. If we are earning money, it is only in the hope we can buy sex. We seek higher positions only in order to be powerful enough to be able to select and secure sexual partners. That is why, in days past, the reputation of a king was measured by the number of queens he had. And that is the right measure, because what is the value of your power? So, power, status, and money are in roundabout way only meant for the satisfaction of the fundamental sex drive. As long as your energies are flowing downward towards the sex center, it is possible you will be spiritually undisciplined. If you want to direct your energy to higher levels, then the direction of your sexual energy will have to be reversed. The entire direction of the flow has to be changed. You will have to make an about face and shift your entire attention to an upward direction. There must be an upward vertical movement, and this will be a great spiritual discipline. At every step, there will be confrontation, and a need for sacrifice. You will have to lose all that is inferior and lower in order to gain that which is vast and sublime. This price has to be paid. And when you achieve higher powers at such a cost, how can you then misuse them? There is no question of misuse, because the person who was capable of misusing these powers will be finished before he reaches the goal. It is because of this that black magic was born in Tibet. Because of those external operations, there was a very little spiritual growth, and evil practices could thrive due to the immense powers that become available. Among Sufis, there is a story about Jesus. In Christianity, there is no mention of this anywhere, but there are many such stories about Jesus among the Sufis, stories which Christianity does not have. Even Muslims have accounts of some important events in the life of Jesus which are not found in Christianity. The story is recorded by the Sufis. Jesus had three disciples who said to him they had heard about his power to revive the dead. They did not want salvation or the kingdom of God, but they wanted him to tell them the secret of raising the dead so they could have that power. Jesus told them they would never be able to use the mantra for themselves, because once they were dead, how could they use it? How could they benefit in making others come to life? He told them instead he would show them how to not die at all. But the disciples said they were not worried about their own deaths. They were only interested in knowing how the dead could be made alive. Finally, Jesus became tired of them and he showed them the method. Immediately, all three left him to search for a dead body somewhere, to try out the mantra before they forget something or made some mistake. Unfortunately, in the first village they reached, they could not find a dead body, so they went to another one, and on the way they found a skeleton. As they could not find a dead body, they thought they would try the mantra on the skeleton. It was the skeleton of a lion. They used the mantra, and immediately the lion came to life and killed all three of them. Sufis say that only such things can be the result. The curiosity of an unethical mind can take one into great danger, and so much secret knowledge was kept hidden so it could not fall into the wrong hands. Anything given to an ordinary person was given in such a way that they would come to understand it only when they deserved to. You may wonder why I have been telling you all this in relation to the tilak. A tilak was put on every child's forehead when he did not understand anything about it. But as he grew up and came to understand such things, he would figure out the mystery of the tilak. Until then, just a hint about the right spot was given. Whenever the child consciousness became capable, he could make use of this mark. It did not even matter if out of 100 people only one become capable of using the tilak. That one was enough. If it made only one person aware of his third eye center, it had served its purpose. There is so much value placed on the tilak that on all special occasions, such as marriage or victory, the tilak is applied. Have you ever stopped to wonder why the tilak is applied on every occasion of respect and honor? It is because of the law of association. Our mind is very interesting. It wants to forget the moments of misery and wants to remember the moments of happiness. That is why the mind forgets all events that brought unhappiness and remembers only the moments that gave happiness. That is why we always feel that the past was full of happiness. An old man always thinks he was happy in his childhood. It is because the mind drops all painful memories and keeps those that are pleasant. So, when a person looks back on the past, he only sees happiness. Whatever unhappiness was there in between, the pleasant moments is forgotten. No child ever says his childhood is full of happiness. Children want to grow up fast. It is old people who say their childhood was full of happiness. There is a misunderstanding somewhere. If you ask a child what he would like, he will tell you he wants to grow up. If you ask old people what they want, they will say they would like to be children again. The child always tries to look grown up and tries to become older. He begins to smoke cigarettes only because he feels that smoking is a symbol of being grown up. Psychologists says that 70% of children begin smoking because it is the symbol of prestige. They think only big, strong, successful people smoke. So when a child smokes, he holds himself straight and he feels he is somebody, not just an ordinary person. In a films is for adults only. Boys will put on fake mustaches to try to get into the show. Why? There is a burning desire in children to grow up quickly. Yet old people say that childhood was very happy. Why? The only reason is that the mind makes us forget unhappy times. Unhappiness is not worth remembering. One psychologist Piaget, after experimenting with children for 40 years, found that the memory of the first 5 years of life is very poor, almost nil, because those years are so unhappy, the child does not want to remember them. If you try to remember the events of your life, of your early life, according to Piaget, you will remember back to when you were 5 or at the most 4 years old. Was there no memory formation before then? There was. Were there no events before you were 5 years old? There were. In those early days, did no one abuse you? Did someone not love you? All these things happened, but why then is there no memory of those first 4 or 5 years? Piggott says that early childhood days were full of unhappiness for the child. The child feels weak, helpless, and so dependent that he suppresses the memory. He simply drops those days from his memory. If asked about them, he simply says, I don't remember anything before the age of 4. Because when his father told him to get up, he had to obey. If his mother told him to sit down, he had to obey. Everyone around him was more powerful and he could not go against them. He was as helpless as a dry leaf in the wind. He had to do whatever he was told. He was dependent on others for everything. Just the hint of anger in the other's eye, and he was frightened. So he just closes up and forgets that he had any life before he was 4 years old. But if he is hypnotized and asked to remember events from before he was 4 or even when he was in the mother's womb, he will remember and describe them. If during the pregnancy his mother fell over under the influence of hypnosis, the child can remember the shock it felt in her womb. But in ordinary consciousness, usually such memories cannot be recalled. There is a strong reason to associate the tilak with one's moments of happiness. Whenever there is a happy event, let a tilak be put on your forehead. Both the happy event and the tilak will be remembered through association. Here it is necessary to know a little about the law of association. Pavlov, the Russian scientist, carried out many experiments in this area. He said anything can be associated with anything else. Our lives are just the sum total of our associations. One of his experiments is well known. It involved offering food to a dog. Pavlov would put the food at some distance so the dog would start salivating while he was looking at the food. Then Pavlov would ring a bell. There is no connection between a bell and the secretion of saliva. But whenever the food was offered to the dog, the secretion of saliva would begin and then the bell was rung. This was done for 15 days. And so the mental association between the bell and the saliva was established. On the 16th day, there was no food, but when the bell was rung, the dog began to salivate. The ringing of the bell activated the dog's memory of the food. The bell became a symbol for the food. This same law of association has been used with the tilak. It has become associated with happiness. Whenever a happy event occurred, a tilak was used. So gradually the tilak and happiness become so associated that the tilak could never be forgotten. So whenever you become happy, you will first remember the third eye chakra. We always like to remember happy moments. And whether we were really happy or not, we live in happy memories. Even small happiness are exaggerated. We magnify the happy events and minimize the unhappy ones. When you first met your beloved, you were so happy. When you think about it today, it was such a great event. But when you actually meet her today, that happiness will have shrunk. Then again, within the next 24 hours, you will magnify it. There is so much unhappiness in life. If we do not magnify the happiness, it would be difficult to live. If the tilak is associated with the happiness, as the happiness becomes magnified, so too does the tilak. When this happens frequently, happiness becomes associated with the third eye chakra. When this happens, you must realize that you have used happiness in order to open the third eye. We can use this stream of happiness to activate the third eye chakra. The more we activate it from different directions, the more helpful it is. The countries which have not used the tilak have not known what the third eye is. Countries which had even the slightest inkling of the third eye have made use of the tilak. The countries which had no concept of the third eye could not invent the tilak. There was no basis for it. A society will not suddenly get the idea of applying a tilak to the forehead without any reason. There is no reason to apply a tilak just at random on any spot. So it is not just accidental, and such a practice can survive only if there is a deep reason for it. I will tell you a few more things about this third eye point. You may have noticed that whenever you are anxious, there is a pressure on your third eye. Because of that, your forehead contracts and wrinkles are formed. The tension builds up just on the spot where the tilak would be placed. Those who are continuously tense and constantly thinking and reflecting can invariably indicate the location of the spot by the pressure which they feel on their forehead. People who have worked hard on the third eye in their past lives have, at the time of birth, a sort of tilak on the forehead right at the third eye point. This spot appears slightly worn, just as if a tilak had been there. If you touch this spot on the forehead with your finger, it will feel a little swollen, just there where in past lives a tilak was worn. Behind the tilak or tika is hidden the third eye. There was a small experiment carried out by hypnotists. Charcot was a great psychologist in France who worked on the subject of influencing a person by focusing his eyes on the other's forehead. If you try to concentrate your gaze on someone's forehead, he will become very angry and will not let you continue. It is thought ill mannered and rude to do so. From the forehead, the third eye chakra is about 1.5 inches inside, very close to the surface. If someone is walking in front of you and you fix your eyes on the back of his head, approximately at a level of his third eye spot, you will find that within a few seconds, this person will turn to look around behind him. If you continue this experiment for a few days and then give someone some suggestions, he will carry them out. Try to understand. If you focus your gaze at the back of his head for a few seconds without even once letting your eyelids close, the person will look behind him. Then, just at that moment, you can mentally command him to do something. If you asked him to turn left, he will do so, although he will feel very embarrassed. He may have wanted to turn right. If you do this experiment for some time, you will be surprised at the results. From the back of the head, the distance of the third eye point is further than from the front, where the distance is only 1.5 inch. And from the front, the results are even more surprising. People who practice fake Saktipat, transmitting energy, are able to do so through the third eye chakra. If some holy man or monk makes you sit in front of him with your eyes closed, you may think he is really doing something. He is only fixing his eyes on this spot on your forehead and mentally giving you a suggestion. If he says there is a bright light within you, you will feel there is light inside you. But that light does not remain with you. As soon as you are away from him, it vanishes. Sometimes that illusion of light may persist for 2 or 3 days and then it dies out. It is not genuine Saktipat, but only an insignificant exercise on your third eye chakra. The third eye is a unique gift, and there are innumerable usage for it. When Christian missionaries came to southern India for the first time, some of them began applying the tilak for their foreheads. Because of this, about 1,000 years ago, a situation arose in the Vatican court in which an explanation was demanded from those missionaries in India. Some of them had begun to wear the sacred thread, some had applied the tilak, and some even wore wooden sandals on their feet. They had begun to live like Hindu sannyasis. The Vatican court felt that these missionaries were doing something wrong. The missionaries who had begun to live in this way in India replied they were not becoming Hindus by applying the tilak, but that by doing so they had come to know a secret. By wearing wooden sandals on their feet, they had not become Hindus, but they had come to know that if they wore wooden sandals while meditating, the energy does not get dissipated, and so results that would have taken months without the wooden sandals came about within a short time. They also said that if Hindus have come to know certain secrets, Christian missionaries would only be fools not to learn them. Certainly, Hindus know many things. It would be really surprising if they didn't. Having been on a religious quest for 20,000 years, for 20,000 years, all their most intelligent and wisest men have devoted their lives to the same end, the search for truth. They were possessed with only one desire, to know the truth that is hidden behind this existence, to see that which is invisible and to encounter that which is formless. It would be really amazing if such people didn't know anything. After having single mindedly dedicated all their intelligence to this single quest for 20,000 years continuously. It is only natural they would know, and they do. But during the last 200 years, certain things happened which are very disturbing. It is worth understanding. In this country, there have been hundreds of foreign invasions, but no invader could ever attack the vital core. Some invaders looked for wealth, some occupied land, others captured places and forts, but none could attack the interiority of India. The attention of invaders was not drawn towards it. But then, for the first time, attacks were made on its interiority by Western civilization. The easiest way to attack it was to disconnect the country from its long history and to destroy the past. A gap was created between the people and their history. In this way, people became uprooted and powerless. In Western civilization were to be destroyed today, if Western civilization were to be destroyed today, there would be no need to destroy its buildings, its cinemas, its theaters, or its hotels. If just the five most famous universities were destroyed, all the Western culture would disappear. Western culture does not reside in its cinemas, hotels, or nightclubs. It makes no difference if they continue. But if the most eminent universities were destroyed, Western civilization would slowly die and become lost. The real basis of all cultures is its sources of knowledge. The roots of civilization are in its long chain of knowledge. If the history of just two generations were taken away, a country would become cut off from all possibilities of further progress. That is the difference between human beings and animals. Animals are not able to make progress because they do not have schools. They have no way to transfer knowledge from the older generation to the new generation. At its birth, an animal begins life right from where its father began, and its offspring will do the same. The human beings, through education, can help his child's life to begin from where he left off. So there is a continuity of knowledge. All human progress depends on the transfer of accumulated knowledge from generation to generation. Just imagine If for 20 years all adults decided not to teach anything to their children, it would not just be a loss of 20 years worth of knowledge, but all the knowledge which has been collected over 20,000 years could become lost. And such a loss could not be made up for in 20 years. It would take 20,000 years to make up the gap because a discontinuity would have been created in the accumulation of knowledge. In this way, the 200 years of British dominance in India created a great gap. Most of its links with the ancient knowledge and wisdom were broken, and it had to establish an identity with a totally new civilization and culture with which its older civilization had no relationship. Indians think there is a very old civilization, but they are mistaken. They are only a 200-year-old community. The British are now a far older community than the Indians. Whatever knowledge India has now is just rubbish, and that too is just leftovers. That which the West chooses to give India now is its knowledge. Whatever India knew before 200 years ago was lost in one stroke. When the threads of a branch of knowledge are lost, people seems just like ignorant fools. If you go out now with a tika on your forehead and someone asks you why you are wearing it, you will feel ashamed because you have no answer. You can only say, no reason, my father insisted on my doing it, and so I had to. What to do? Certain things have to be put up with. So these days, applying a tika cheerfully is difficult, if not impossible. Of course, a simpleton can do it. He has no fear of others, but he is doing it not because he knows its purpose, but because he has been told to. When the links of real knowledge are broken, the outward symbols of it becomes difficult to carry. Then a certain tragedy results. Those with intelligence keep away, and a thing remains meaningful only as long as intelligent people are involved in it. So it is interesting to note that whenever such a misfortune overwhelms a civilization, whenever it loses its connection with the past knowledge, the intellectuals drift away from it because they do not like to look foolish, and the ignorant masses try to preserve the symbols and follow the rituals. And so those symbols and rituals will continue for some time and then die a natural death. So sometimes it happens that some valuable things are preserved by ignorant and backward people, and the people who claim to understand disappear at the first opportunity. Life is very complex. If India wants to restore the broken links with its past, people will have to look at every ritual being performed by the ignorant and illiterate masses. What they are doing is not without reason. Their outward symbols are linked with a past of 20,000 years. They may not be able to explain why they are doing certain things, but there is no need to frown upon them. Someday we may have to thank them for at least having saved the symbols of that knowledge, symbols on which research can be done. So, in India today, what these illiterate people are doing needs to be reconnected with the knowledge we had prior to 200 years ago. Only by doing that can we revive and give new life to the deep understanding that grew over a period of 20,000 years. Then we will be surprised at how societal we have been. So, this is all about this chapter. A very interesting, a very knowledgeable, very informative, and a very, you can say, meditative chapters. So, I hope you loved this chapter, you enjoy this chapter, gain some knowledge, some perspective out of it. So, keep learning, keep enjoying, keep traveling, and try to experience various aspects of this creation through meditation, through yoga, and through spirituality. Make your mechanism in such a way that all energy forms are very easily perceivable by you, and you experience every piece of this creation in its real form. Your mechanism is capable of doing this because our mechanism is the most complex, most sophisticated mechanism on our planet Earth, and we can achieve whatever we want in our life with the help of this mechanism. So, be meditative, be curious, and be seeker, and explore each and every dimension of this existence. Namaskaram. Thank you.